All right, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you listen. Whatever time you're listening. This is the second part of the lecture about disembedding, which is the concept that we are studying right now in relation to globalization, which is one of the ways to describe the modern world. Okay, and you got to remember what the definition of disembedding is. The key word here becomes lifting up or lifting out, okay, like detachment. The lifting out of things from their immediate context, okay, in particular social relations. Such as people being uprooted and brought somewhere else in terms of their like migration stories or because of the internet and so on. But also, not only in terms of people, but in terms of many phenomena, many things. Okay, so the lifting out of things and people from their immediate contexts and placement of those things and people into other contexts. Okay, that's the kind of general definition of disembedding, and you can see how that affects the whole world. Last time I gave you the example of money, which is very telling, right? How money started, or let's say economic exchange, even before money started as people fishing their own fish or picking their own apples and so on, and that how that became much more abstracted as societies became more dynamic and more sophisticated, so that now we have gone from fishing our own fish to having a credit card which gives you power. Money is power. Money is condensed power, right? That gives you the power to purchase things with money that you do not have, so that the bank trusts that you will have money in the future and charges you some interest for it. So that's just one example. Today I want to give you more examples of disembedding, just to show you the kind of the variety of ways in which this concept applies to the modern world, and it should be thought of as a modern phenomena, as a modern thing. I was thinking right before I started recording the second lecture, which I hope will be shorter than the last one, as it is complementary but key also. I was thinking, I don't know if it's ironic or simply descriptive of the modern world, but this very class is disembedded, right? So you are reading books that have been lifting out. They're not books. I give you a PDF, okay? Back in the day, you had to buy a book. Right now, a PDF is a sort of book, right? So there you go. That's disembedded from its physicality and also abstracted and made sort of liquefied, or even made into a sort of cloud, right? Because I put the book online, right, in the cloud, some server somewhere. That's the cloud, and you from your devices, whether it be a phone, whether it be a tablet, whether it be a computer, you access that book. Okay, so, pardon me, I have a little throat issue, but I should be able to finish this lecture. But the content of the book is the same, but its physicality has been almost completely lost. And I say almost completely lost because it's not completely lost. If the server crashes, well, your PDF might disappear. Right, so it's not completely lost. There's a level of physicality at the end of the day, but it's very different from carrying, a 5-pound book around your backpack like we did back in the day. You don't even need a backpack anymore. You can use an iPhone, right? That's your backpack. Everything is digital, including our identity. So last time we talked about money, and that's because money is such an important part of the modern world. We live in a capitalist open society, right? But there are many other ways in which we can think in terms of disembedding and this kind of movement towards abstraction and towards lightness and detachment from local contexts. All right. So today I'm going to give you a couple examples, and I'm going to go into some stuff related to that. But it should be noted, I think, with some level of irony, or perhaps just an illustration, that this very class is the very epitome of disembedding. Like, you're listening to this lecture, and I'm not talking at the same time that you're listening to it, right? And you're accessing it at different times. If it were an actual physical classroom, it would be embedded, right? You would have to be there to be present. So on top of that, it's asynchronous, meaning you can access it at any point. All right, you catch my point. You get my point. All right, so let's move on. Let me give you the example of something that's kind of cool in terms of disembedding, just to show you like the different ways in which this applies, and it almost applies to everything. Seriously, that's why it's such a key notion. And when we read the novel, you will see. I want you to apply your thoughts about the concepts about disembedding to the novel itself and the different people in it. First of all, we can think in terms of nationality. Okay, so what is nationality? Nationality refers to when somebody belongs to a certain community, typically a republic, right? That has a level of cohesion and sometimes, not always, similar language, cultural identifiers, and also legal identifiers, such as a passport, correct? So you have an American passport because you're a U.S. citizen. You have a Mexican passport if you are a Mexican citizen. You have a Canadian passport, and so on, right? So that's the idea or the concept of nationality. Well, it goes much more. It goes beyond the legal, obviously, so that people many times have almost like a spiritual connection to the nation and a love for the nation, right? So that even if they're not born in that country, sometimes they hold on to their national identity. This becomes clear when you ask somebody who's like second generation American, and you say, "Where are you from?" And they tell you, "Oh, I'm from Guatemala," or something. And you ask, "Okay, where were you born?" And they're like, "No, I was born in, I don't know, San Francisco, but my granddad was born in Guatemala." So there's like a level of kind of I want to say ethnic or national or spiritual identification with that national source. Okay, so it's very important to people, and including myself, obviously, I identify in different ways. We have different ways of identifying, but definitely what I want to get across is the fact that people's nationality is, first and foremost, I think, a legal descriptor, right? You have that passport from wherever you're from, or whatever country you became a citizen of, if you became naturalized. Interesting word, naturalized. So yeah, therefore you have that. So it's a legal descriptor, and you're able to vote, you're able to do certain things in whatever country you're a citizen of, right? But it's also a cultural descriptor, in that people belong to a certain culture. Typically, they speak a certain language. They share some common values, if not all. Not all, for example, religions. You can be any religion and be, from Turkey, right? Just to give you an example, wild example. So it's not everything, but there are some cultural similarities, such as vocabulary and so on. Also a sense of a shared past and perhaps even a shared future. Though mostly a shared past, right? We, the citizens of the United States, have been through a lot, right? Something like that. When you hear those phrases of a politician or a historian, you identify with the past, right? At the national level, right? When we got our independence from England, from the Queen, and so on. So how does that apply to disembedding? Well, it applies in this way. in the as republics and nations became more widespread, because before that we had kingdoms, right, or we had tribes, or we had other sorts of social groupings, right? But I want to say, starting from the 19th, even before that, but mostly at the worldwide level, 19th century, you see a lot of nations kind of popping up, right? Most notably, the democracies of the world, the first democracies of the world, the United States and France. So they kind of set a footprint. You had republics prior, thousands of years ago with the Greeks and so on. But in the modern sense, it kind of starts with that. So with the first democracies of the world, the United States and France. It was a very new experiment. So with that, that kind of idea spreads slowly at first and then massively all over the world, so that many countries in the world, most countries in the world, have a sense of this kind of national identity, right? It's a kind of equalizer, right? Even if you think in terms how sort of equalized it's become, think in terms of the size of a passport, right? Most passports are the same size, the same shape. They are sort of commodified, or they are made in a kind of cookie cutter fashion, to use a kind of informal word, in order to make them the same, or to be able to compare and contrast. Okay, so I went off on a tangent, but I'm going to come back right away to the idea of disembedding in globalization. All right, so take the country of Chile in South America, the Pacific coast of South America, west of Argentina, south of Peru, long country in its geographical shape. Well, Chile had a dictatorship in the 70s, a military dictatorship from 1973, I think, to 1991. I think those are the dates, okay? Kind of CIA-backed dictatorship, so U.S.-backed, because the U.S. was against the government of Chile, which was, prior to the dictatorship, it was a democratically elected socialist sort of government, and being that it was the time of the Cold War, the U.S. backed up this sort of military coup by a sort of big honcho over there, a military big honcho named Augusto Pinochet. Anyway, that's a little history, but the idea is that Chile, this country that was formerly democratic, became dictatorial, meaning, you had a military head of state that told you what to do and that didn't allow certain things and that killed a lot of people, and, it was awful. So what happened is that because of that, a lot of people from Chile left. Right? Now, I told you what nationality does to a person. It's not like you leave your country and you leave your nationality behind. You take your nationality with you, right? You might become a citizen of another country, but your feelings of national love and identification remain, for the most part, at least for a long, long time. Anyway, so from 1973 on, a lot of people left, migrated, right, because of this situation. A lot of people migrate from their countries when the situation gets really tough, whether they become, economic immigrants, refugees, whether they become, they're fleeing persecution. Sometimes because of personal reasons, they might fall in love with someone and they follow them, to a different nation and so on. But mostly when people leave en masse, meaning at great numbers, then it is because of these kind of terrible, difficult situations. Okay, so you have the example of Venezuela right now. Venezuela is a northern South American country where that has an economy that has tanked and a kind of non-democratic single-party regime at the time, and so thousands, if not millions, of Venezuelans, millions probably, have left. So that's current, and that, all over the world you see it, and you see populations of people here in LA that left in great numbers during a difficult time of their national past, whether it be El Salvador, Guatemala, or Armenia, or other countries, right? Anyhow, the people from Chile left, like for 20 years they left, almost close to 20 years they left, right? And then at one point, as most dictatorships do, Pinochet got too old to be dictator of Chile, and he retired. And actually, the country went back to democracy, which was a miracle in a way. And it wasn't a perfect democracy, but they went back to democracy anyway. So the government of Chile realized in the 2000s that a lot of the people that had left, 20 years prior, 10 years prior, were not coming back. That makes sense, because how are they gonna come back if they have built? Some might have come back. But, if they have built emotional and familial ties elsewhere, so a lot of them went to Europe, married Europeans, or their children were born in Europe or the United States or Mexico, right? So, but they were still Chileans abroad. So that's a perfect example of what they did. In the early 2000s, the government of Chile thought, okay, so there are people from Chile in 110 countries around the world, okay? And like I said, it's probably not likely that they will return. So they decided, okay, we need to integrate these Chileans into our national sort of discourse and our national fabric. That's a better way of putting it. And how are we going to do that? Well, we need to accept the fact they're not going to come back, but they are still Chilean and we can still integrate them. So they created a kind of ministry of Chileans abroad. So they called it like the sort of unofficial Chile abroad. Okay, it was the unofficial Chile abroad. I think Mexicans who are abroad, where it is a sort of, let's call it a state. That's a state for those who are not in Chile, who are not in Mexico. Now, Chile has 13 provinces, 13 regions, like 13 states, right? And they decided to call it, okay, Chileans abroad, even though they're in 110 countries, we're going to call that group, that population, the 14th region, the 14th state. So it wasn't like a physical state. It was just like almost like a legal definition where if you were from Chile and you were abroad, you kind of were, what state did you live in? What region did you do? Okay, I live in the 14th region, meaning the region abroad. So that's an abstraction, right? In the same way that credit cards are an abstraction, this is an abstraction as well. So it didn't just end there. They decided to give these Chileans kind of like tax breaks, give them funds, allow for them to like come back, and, increasingly with the internet, like services, so that they would be integrated into Chile, all right? Many initiatives were taken to, for example, have Chileans who were studying abroad or artists who were living abroad for them to apply for grants in their country of birth. Okay, so that is something where we're talking about nationalism from a different context, disembedded nationalism. Okay, so that has happened also with many, many other countries that have that, but Chile was very kind of sui generis, right? They were very new at applying those things. And so you see that all the time with not just Chile, but with other nations where you have large groups of global migrants in another country, and they sort of connect via a like official policy. Okay, so that's, and also because of the rise of the internet, they might be able to read like their country's newspapers every day, listen to radio shows from their country and so on. So in a way, you have a strong collective of people who are linked yet disembedded. So hopefully you can see how that is similar conceptually to the example of money that I gave you. Okay, so also one has to say that it affects like immigration debates, because if you have, radio shows from your home country and like newspapers, and you can practice the language every day, it's not like you're going to integrate in this, your host country, your new country, in the same way that you might have integrated, say, like 150 years ago, right? So that changes also those dynamics. So just to summarize, we can say that nationalism or nationality has also become deterritorialized, disembedded, uprooted, or it may become so. It is possible in today's world. So that's an example that I wanted to give you. All right. Then I want to give you another example that about disembedding related to people, but remember it goes beyond people, right? Like I told you about machines that are, if you look at your iPhone, it's made with like parts from all over the world, like cars, so that the whole market is integrated, and it's difficult to say like where were your shoes made, right? Even that question becomes sort of pointless, because like, well, maybe it was put together in Vietnam, right? But the parts come from, I don't know, I'm just going to give you a random place, like Sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria. The cotton comes from Texas. The plastic comes from China. And then it is marketed by a European, let's say, I think Adidas is German, right? So like, let's say it's marketed by Adidas. Okay, so they marketed, and and it's designed by like Kanye West, right? So just to give you an example, right, or a guest star. Therefore, when we say, oh, my shoes are made in Vietnam, well, really? So it's really difficult to like trace back in terms of that. So that's also disembedding. It's a concept that I know I'm kind of saying it over and over, but I really want you to like grasp that. It's a concept that goes beyond the social, okay? However, we want to focus on people, right? Because that is something that the book that we're reading, the novel, focuses on people, but it's a concept that goes beyond people. But people are at the heart of it also, all right? So another example would be disembedded friendship. Disembedded friendship. I mean, that's one that goes in together with like disembedded identity, okay? But let's talk about disembedded friendship first. Okay, so you know how that started, right? Facebook. You had Mark Zuckerberg, who was at Harvard, and he decided to sort of create an online catalog of people, classmates, and or like Harvard students. So what he did is he kind of took the Harvard he took the material from what was called Harvard Facebooks. Okay, some of it he hacked into to create like a kind of comprehensive list of Harvard students. Okay, and then that expanded to include other universities. Okay, and that was probably back in the 90s. Okay, so like late 90s, which seems like a long time ago, but it's not, right? Then beyond that, he started including photos and the Facebook that we know today started developing. Okay, which in September of 2006, Facebook was open to the general public. That's probably, well, it was before some of you were born, or right at the time, or not too long after. So it seems like a long time ago, but in the big scheme of things, it's not. Okay. And then by autumn 2013, less than 7 years after its launch, Facebook had 1 billion users worldwide. Okay, so within 7 years, Facebook had 1 billion users. So people started using Facebook to keep up with their family, because we know that a lot of people migrate, or maybe keep up with their friends because a lot of people change jobs. Also post their political ideas, get into silly arguments, make mistakes, post selfies, so the kind of contemporary culture of internet interaction, friendship, and identity developed quickly after that. So, but we're talking about not too long ago. So these are new things. Okay, so I'm going to quote here from Eriksen's book. Facebook can be described as an ongoing deterritorialized conversation between people who sometimes know each other outside of Facebook, who are sometimes aware of each other outside of Facebook, and who sometimes know each other only through their online presence. So let me ask you something. We can replace Facebook with Twitter or Instagram. It's essentially the same thing. Facebook was the sort of pioneer and driving force of that. So do you know all of your online friends, right? Physically. And the answer is probably no, right? You have some people that your sole interaction will be online, and perhaps will only be online to the end of that friendship, or until you move to a different platform. So are those real friendships? I don't know if they're real friendships. I don't think you can have a friend who you only know online. That's not a friend, in my opinion. But I came up at a time, prior to social media. So you might think differently. But I don't think you can have a romantic relationship with somebody, let's say, solely based online, or a friendship solely based online. But it's not that. I mean, that's an extreme, because many friendships online are disembedded, even though they have had a physical interaction point at a prior moment, right? So I have some friends from college who I don't see anymore because they're elsewhere in the country or another country, and I interact with them online. And it's not like the friendship is solely based online. Well, now it might be, but at some point it had a physical component. But we live in different contexts, but we can interact by liking each other's pictures, by talking, chatting, or whatever, So that's interesting. That's another aspect of disembedding. That's not only, the national, which I told you, the Chile example. And it's not only the kind of monetary. I gave you the kind of currency example, right? In the last lecture. This is more kind of social interactions and friendships. Okay, so you might not know all of your friends online, and so what does that do? Okay, we don't know exactly because the studies have not come out yet, and it's kind of too early. Well, but we do know some things. It makes people more isolated. Actually, people need real sort of. Real. The word "real" becomes problematic here, right? Contextualized, context-specific interactions. Context-specific interactions are needed, and I know they go deeper. A person that you can see online will be, no matter how much you share, will be always filtered through the screen and the pixels. the collection of pixels that their image becomes. So many friendships are now totally disembedded and deterritorialized. Okay, so that they are a different phenomenon. They are a disembedded phenomenon, as I said, and in fact, many part of our identities are also disembedded, so that there's like, with Instagram and even with like professional pages like LinkedIn, right? What you project, what you put out there is by definition, an abstraction from who you are, right? Because you only put certain parts, like you curate your photos. Unless you're recording yourself 100% of the time, and even then, it cannot be replicated in its reality, right? So when we define ourselves and whatnot online, and we put our pictures online, and we have relationships online, we are definitely stepping into that world of disembedding, and our identities are online. But I think, I was going to say I don't want to lecture, but I am lecturing. That's the whole point of these, right? There is a problem at the psychological level and at the social level, in that if we have our identities placed online, and we are sort of attached to those identities which are online, right? However you portray yourself on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, then there has to be, by definition, a disconnection from your sense of identity in the real world's context, right? Because maybe you take photos of yourself on Instagram, and you only put photos online that make you look a certain way, right? So that you get attached to those, like almost like distorted identities. And maybe your friends are only online, and so therefore you get attached to those distorted friendships. So what happens to your actual identity and your actual friendships? Maybe you don't have any. Maybe all your friendships are digital, okay? Maybe all your thrills are digital, so that can create a very interesting sort of dynamic and contradiction there. But I don't want to be excessively negative. It also helps you get in touch with people. It keeps you connected to former friends. Many people meet online, and they get married, and their married lasts, and they have kids and everything. So there are a lot of good things that people organize politically, sometimes for the right reasons, but also it's not only positive. Hate groups are online as well, so we shouldn't be naively positive, right? But we shouldn't be negative, kind of close-mindedly negative either. But we should know that it is a tool that helps us expand, right? In the same way I gave you that metaphor that applies. It's like we went from sort of ice, right? From being solid to becoming liquefied to becoming steam, right? So that's the metaphor that applies here as well. So, the quote that Eriksen ends with, this quote, which I find, what he quotes from Daniel Miller, who says that, quote, "The desire by nearly everyone on our planet to be on the same network as everyone else. The reach that you have is just enormous. And that kind of shatters the walls of the physical, right? So that now they're talking about whole worlds made of VR, right? Virtual reality. And so then that's really disembedded, right? They are taking the whole world and placing it somewhere else, or well, an idea of the whole world and space, right? And if you add artificial intelligence to that, now it's like we're going beyond the modern into like I don't know, into like a future or something like that. But it's really interesting. Just to give you an example, just super quickly, I don't want to extend myself too much, but I've had students turn in AI recently, and I've caught them. Maybe not all, who knows, but I've caught a few. And don't do that, by the way. I'll give you an F right away, and you probably won't pass the class if you do even a single assignment on AI. It's just not gonna. I lose all respect for people who do that. But anyway, so I thought I was under the suspicion that some students were doing that because their like journals and their spoken skills didn't match their essay. So like I decided to go online and use a tool to try to catch them, and lo and behold, I was right. They had been using artificial intelligence to write the essays. But guess what? I used a machine also to like help me detect the AI. So in a way, this is almost like a science fiction movie. My students were using AI to write the essay, and I was using AI to find the essays that had been written with AI, artificial intelligence. And so therefore, technically, we were both using machines to like fight each other in a way, right? It was like a competition of machines. So that's right out of the like, I don't know, Terminator world. So so we have a couple other examples. I'm not going to go over more than like 10 minutes. I've already kind of extended myself. But another good example of disembedding at the social level has to do with like social class and how people like either separate themselves or integrate themselves. So let me like explain these to you, right? In many developing countries, but also in the United States and other developed countries, you have the idea of a gated community, okay? What is that? So in many countries, many cities, you have like crime or like poverty, and you have a lot of sort of poor people that struggle, whether they be homeless or so on, but also criminals, right? So what happens is that middle class or upper middle class people, sometimes in these cities, whether it be, like a family member or like just people who have the same level of like monetary privilege, they say, okay, we don't want to take those risks, so we are going to like make our neighborhood its own little city with like security guards outside, walls, and maybe electric wiring. And I've seen that myself. And then inside, they'll have like maybe a swimming pool, maybe a basketball court, maybe like a kind of 7-Eleven and so on, and other services, maybe like even like a medical facility and so on. I mean, it depends how big they are, but essentially, so they might be in a working class or in a poor city, and yet that gated community is an enclave of privilege, an enclave of wealth. And they might have, like the internet, whereas like people outside might not, or the different classes or kinds of internet, or, like cable TV, and their kids go to private schools. And that's like a very physical disembedding. So in a way, people who live in those gated communities are kind of shielding themselves from the surrounding problems of social ills, right? And you see that in the United States as well, to a degree. You have some, I think, gated communities in Beverly Hills and whatnot, where you read this street is private, right? You can't really enter that. There might be like a security guard there or cameras. Okay, so, but mostly this happens in the poor world, what they used to call the third world. People don't call it like that anymore, but developing world is, or the global south also, that's another term that they use, essentially just poorer countries, right? And yeah, that happens a lot, the gated communities. So, that's kind of, the gated community is uprooted, it's disembedded from the kind of fabric, the general fabric of the city, and it's almost like they live in like Europe or the United States, even though they might be in like Latin America or Southeast Asia or something. So that happens a lot, and that is the actual opposite, if you think about it, from the kind of embedded nationalism of the Chilean experiment, right? So I'm going to read from Eriksen. I'm going to quote from Eriksen. This example suggests a development that is complementary and signifies the opposite of the example of the 14th Chilean province. This example suggests a development that is complementary to and signifies the opposite of the example of the 14th Chilean province. While the internet and increased transnational interaction can serve to reintegrate diaspora Chileans into the imagined community of the nation, the growth of gated communities in third world cities signifies the detachment of groups which are physically located in the nation state but are kind of separate from it. Okay? And this kind of concludes my talk on disembedding. We've been really thorough about it. And you remember, disembedding is one of the 9 components of globalization. And perhaps it's the most important component of globalization, I think, or one of the most important ones. Now, remember, disembedding can be defined as the lifting out of things or relations from local contexts of interaction and restructured across indefinite spans of time-space. So they're lifted out of their context and put in a context that is more dynamic, more kind of less linked to their source. Okay? In fact, some things have no place of origin that it can be traceable. Like I gave you the example of like hamburgers, where like each patty of meat is made of like meat that comes from like 5 different countries. In fact, even the idea of meat sometimes, like Taco Bell was sued because they were using the word meat to describe the stuff in their tacos. And some people that sued them were saying like that can't qualify as meat because it's mostly like foreign, non-meat products, like artificial products. And so they went to court. And then I think Taco Bell won and they're able to use the word meat. But the truth is that, their so-called meat is mostly made of non-meat products. So that is definitely lifted out of their context. In fact, if we're talking about meat, I mean, there's so many examples of these. Now scientists can grow meat in labs, and that's actual meat, but it's not made of a cow. It's like kind of, let's say, filet, or a part of a thigh or something that is grown in a lab, and it is not part of an actual cow, but it is meat. So that is completely this. So you have beef that is disembedded from the cow. I think I cannot have a better example of the modern kind of disembedding. I cannot give you a better example of this situation than that. Okay, but you have friendships, you have money, you have romantic relationships. A lot of things are disembedded. National sentiments, video games, sports, and so on. That's the whole world. It's kind of like that, and we're migrating to the cloud, as it were. All right. Disembedding refers to a main trajectory of globalization. So it's a main part of globalization, meaning things are becoming more abstract, and their origin has become obscured. Okay? Their origin has become more obscure, and they are sort of lifted from their origin and thrust into the global highway of economic exchange. Example, yoga. Right? I don't know if anybody here has done yoga or hot yoga or something, but it's an American thing now here, but its origin is in India, right? How close to it is it? I don't know. Some people have called it Mac yoga. They have called this phenomena the McDonaldization of society. Okay, so it's a main trajectory of globalization. It helps that we live in a capitalistic society that makes things easier for economic exchange because we all use money, as opposed to like little shells or gold or something like that. And most of us can read and write, and the people around the world a lot of people speak English, and so things are becoming standardized. That is a closely related phenomena called standardization. Okay? Things become standardized intensely at the same rate that they become deterritorialized and disembedded. Okay? Technology helps disembedding, obviously. And lastly, I will end with this. Not everybody is happy with disembedding. And the reason for that is that many critics of disembedding, while seeing the sort of benefits to it, they see the negative sides, such as isolation, right? Isolation, because if you don't have a connection to the local, then you might be isolated. Also a kind of dehumanization. For example, you might just be a number, right? You might just be a number in somebody's feed, right? They're not thinking of you as a person, as a flesh and blood person, but you might be thought of as a statistic, okay? We don't even know where our food comes from a lot of times, right? So that it becomes problematic, and many people have reacted against it in good ways and in bad ways. I don't want to, because here's the thing. I understand why, for example, Colombia, a country that makes coffee, might react against, getting a Starbucks there, like a globalized coffee brand, right? Because they feel like, okay, we have some of the best coffee in the world, and now here's an American corporation that's going to take our coffee, brand it, and sell it back to us for like 3 times the price. We would rather make the coffee here, which grows here, than go global. So I can understand that, how, some people may want to react against that. But, it's not all like one way or another. We have, for example, at the world political level, we have people, for example, here in the United States, erecting walls or separating immigrant children from their parents in order to discourage immigration, which is a form of disembedding, right? Because you're taking people from the local country, they get lifted up and they put themselves on a journey to another country. All right, so that's also a form of, and then you can fight it in very cruel ways. I mean, you only have to read some newspapers to hear the kind of ideas that get passed around, right? Like, they're treated like cattle sometimes, like with the governor of Florida and whatnot, where he ships the undocumented immigrants to like California. A lot of them actually Venezuelans, because we've talked about the circumstances there and so on. But that's not. The U.S. is not the only country. Some other countries are very, very anti-movement of people, and so this is interesting. It has been said that many kind of developed nations, they embrace disembedding of things, right? So they love it when the foods come from other countries, but they are anti-disembedded of people, right? So they want the benefits, but not the so perceived difficulties. So that's, I think I'm going to end with that. So what I want to show you and what I want to kind of paint is the complexity. First of all, two things really quickly in that line. One, that when we talk about disembedding, we're not talking about one thing. It's a concept that applies to many, many things in the world. And once you start seeing it, it's like your eyes become open, and you get awakened to the reality of it. Okay, so that's one. And two, that there are a multiplicity of examples and also different kinds of reactions to it. Some people embrace it. Some people think it's great. Okay, some countries, some people think it's very negative, and a lot of people don't even know how to conceptualize it, and that's why you're here, and now you're able to conceptualize that. All right, I'm going to give you a little writing assignment related to this. So this ends my lecture on disembedding. This is part 2 of my lecture on disembedding, and then we're going to move on to a different aspect of globalization. Thank you.